Today we're going to talk about combining sentences. This actually comes in the second part of the chapter, and we're going to start on page 514. So I'm going to hit the highlights of combining sentences using three methods, and I want you to go back and read the pages of the chapter and make sure you have an understanding of the different ways that we can combine sentences. So the first way is combining sentences using coordinating conjunctions. Before we get into there's some vocabulary that you need to know. You didn't need to know what a phrase, a clause, an independent clause, and a dependent clause are. So a phrase, we have words, single words, a, boy, lamp, dog, house. Then we have phrases. Phrases are a small group of words, and they stand together as a unit. They are the building block of a clause. Phrases are like blowing in the wind, the brown hat, to the store, the boy. Just small groups of words. We use phrases to build clauses. Clauses are groups of words containing a verb. The brown hat was blowing in the wind. Was is the verb. There are kind of two types of clauses we're going to be looking at. An independent clause, which is a group of words that can stand on its own, has a subject, a verb, and a complete thought. If it is independent, it don't need nobody else, right? It can stand on its own. My dog loves pizza crust. Subject, verb, complete thought. A dependent clause is a group of words that cannot stand on their own. Typically, that dependent clause starts with a conjunction or a conjunctive adverb, has a subject and a verb, but it is an incomplete thought, like whenever we go to the theater. It has a subject, we, go is the verb, but it's an incomplete thought. It cannot stand on its own. Therefore, it is dependent. We want to expand our writing and make it a little bit more complex. And by doing that, we sometimes join two clauses. Okay? Whether it's two independent, an independent and dependent, two dependent, we have to make sure that we join them correctly, or else we have what's called a run-on sentence, which is bad, 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 bad. So we're going to look at three ways that you can join two clauses. Okay. You can join two clauses with what's called a coordinating conjunction, CC. And the easiest way, you might have known this or have heard it or learned it, to remember the coordinating conjunctions is through fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Fanboys joins two clauses, like in the sentence. Some Americans believe extreme measures should be taken for airport security. Sorry, this is a independent clause. Okay, we have a sentence here. Others believe the measure violates their privacy rights. Another independent clause. Two sentences that can stand on their own, and we're going to join them with a coordinating conjunction. And in this case, we're going to say but. You want to make sure when you are joining two independent clauses with a fanboy, with our coordinating conjunction, that you have a comma, then the fanboy. Comma and, comma for, comma nor, comma but, comma or, comma yet, and comma so. And this is when you're joining two independent clauses. Okay. Another way is, think of it, when joining two clauses with a coordinating conjunction, a fanboy, use a comma after the first clause, and then add the coordinating conjunction followed by the second clause. Diet Coke is better than Diet Pepsi. That's an independent clause. I would be willing to fight about it is another independent clause. And when we join them with our fanboy and, we have to have comma and. Okay. If we don't have the comma in there, like in the second one, Diet Coke is better than Diet Pepsi and I would be willing to fight about it, you have created a run-on sentence. Run-on sentences are no bueno. They are not good. Okay. And if you join them with just a comma, it's also not good because you created a comma splice. Okay. So whenever you are using a fanboy to join two sentences, it is a comma fanboy. Otherwise, it is incorrect. Okay. So what I want you to do is hit pause, and I want you to read 516 to 528 in your textbook to find out when you're going to use each of your fanboys. And you might want to complete the practices as you move through each of the fanboys. Find out, when do you use for? That's not one that we use very often, right? Or yet. Okay, so I want you to pause, read those pages, and then come back. Okay, welcome back. So let's say you don't want to use a coordinating conjunction, a fanboy. You want to combine them using a dependent word. That is a viable choice, absolutely. Okay. You can turn one of the independent clauses that you're joining, one of the two, into a dependent clause by adding a dependent word to the front of it. For instance, I still love you. You hogged all of the bacon ice cream. Those are our two independent clauses. I still love you. That's independent. Although you hogged all of the bacon ice cream, that is now dependent. It cannot stand on its own. It's an incomplete thought. So I want to join those two sentences in the first, and I can do that by making one of them dependent. In order to do that, I'm going to put a dependent word at the front of one of the independent clauses. Okay. Dependent words are connectors, just like our fanboys, and they serve a variety of functions. They can be to show comparison or cause and effect, possibility, relationship and time. Okay. So what I want you to do is look at the functions and action, page 532, so you understand how dependent words function. Okay. So pause, read page 532, and then come back. Welcome back. All right. So dependent words not only show relationship, but they also emphasize ideas. For instance, you insisted on calling me Senorita Sandwich. I decked you outside on the playground. Those are two independent clauses. I want to make one dependent and join them. So I have to think, which one is more important? Is it that you called me Senorita Sandwich or that I decked you outside? Well, I'm the author, so I can determine which one I want to have is more important. I want the second independent clause. I decked you outside on the playground. That's the one that I want to put the emphasis on. So I'm going to keep that one as independent, and I'm going to make the other one dependent by adding a dependent word at the front of it. The dependent word that fits is since. Since you insisted on calling me Senorita Sandwich, I decked you outside on the playground. Notice when I am starting, let me write this down, when combining the two sentences, if the dependent word starts the newly combined, it needs a comma after the dependent clause. If the, I have two of these, right? If the dependent clause ends the newly combined sentence, no comma is needed. Okay? So look what I did here. I started with if in the second sentence. So I made this first one here, this first part dependent, so I had to put a comma after it. If I would switch it and say no comma is needed if the dependent clause ends the newly combined sentence, I wouldn't have to put a comma there. Okay. So the comma comes when you're starting the newly combined sentence with the dependent clause. Okay. Sorry about that. You use dependent words to combine sentences when you are showing the relationship between them and when you're emphasizing the importance of one clause over the other. It's up to you to determine which of the dependent words fits your purpose. A third method of sentence combining is to use a conjunctive adverb. Okay? Conjunctive adverbs are used to connect clauses just like coordinating conjunctions, fanboys, and dependent words. Here's a list of conjunctive adverbs and some of the functions that they serve, just like our dependent words. Addition, cause and effect, contrast, time. Very similar. You have to punctuate your sentences correctly when you use conjunctive adverbs, just like when you're using comma fanboy, okay, or putting a comma in a dependent clause sentence. So let's look at these two. Her Halloween costume looked absolutely ridiculous. I still gave her a large candy bar for rocking the life-size Cheeto costume. Okay. When I combine them using a conjunctive adverb, however, it's a semicolon, conjunctive adverb, comma. So the end of one independent clause, semicolon, conjunctive adverb, comma, the second independent clause. Okay. So it's semicolon, additionally, comma, semicolon, furthermore, comma, semicolon, conversely, comma, semicolon, however, comma. You want to make sure that you are punctuating them correctly. Fanboys has a comma. Dependent words sometimes have a comma, depending on where it is in the sentence. And conjunctive adverbs have semicolon, conjunctive adverb, comma. So when you want to combine, or when you want to use conjunctive adverbs to combine sentences, is threefold. To show the relationship between your two clauses, just like the past. To combine two short, choppy sentences into one, and then to elevate the diction of your writing. And diction is the level of formality. So look at these three examples. The first one is slang. It would never or should never be used in academic writing. The second one is okay. It's grammatically correct. Look, we combined it with the comma fanboy. Okay. But it's pretty casual. If you want to ratchet up the diction, the level of formality, look what happens when you use a semicolon, conjunctive adverb, comma. Ooh, nevertheless. It sounds fancy, right? It does. It sounds fancy, and it is fancy, and it is high-level formal writing, which is what you want to strive for in college. Okay. Look at page 541, pause it, read it to see the functions of the conjunctive adverb in action, and then come back after you're done reading that. Okay, so that is the second half of that chapter, the combining sentences using coordinating conjunctives, conjunctions, dependent words, and conjunctive adverbs. If you have questions, if you need clarification, if you are unsure, want to run things by me, please join me in my student hours so that you can get your questions answered. Okay, go back into the module and continue working.